See if that works. See if that works. Okay, yeah, it looks like it's working right now. At least on my
Interesting.
end. Let's see. It's but broadcast is not available. Okay, I'll have to tweet that out again. See if that works. To tweet
Hmm.
that out again. Okay. Post that. Delete the old link, and hopefully this will work. So
Yeah. I it's a little strange for me because it's showing like whenever you speak, um, the Discord desktop shows like activity, but whenever I speak, it doesn't show it. I don't know why, but we'll just have to go with it for now, I guess.
okay, yeah. So hello everybody. I'm being interviewed by John Smith's basement over
No, no,
here.
no, I haven't
So
gone live. I haven't gone live yet.
yeah. So are we live on your end? Because we're live on my end now. So
Okay, I'm gonna start. I'm gonna try and start streaming right now. There might be it's a little scuffed, but I still have to manage the broadcast and I have to do all this shit right now. Then oh, sure. I don't know. Now I have to do all this crap. Um, uh, sure. How about this one? I'll change it later. So, uh, start streaming. Um,
yeah, we're just getting set up here.
yeah. Um, okay. So it looks like we are live.
Nice.
All right. So, uh, I just wanna, for people who are watching this in the future, I probably am gonna have no food to stream, and that's okay. Uh, but um, I I'm currently um the reason why I'm starting a series today is I wanted to start a series on me just interviewing random people that I've encountered over my life and on the internet and whatever, and to talk about whatever we're interested in. And today I have someone who I've been acquainted with for a number of years. Um, and for those who don't know, back in my probably about 6 years ago, I made political content, um, mostly revolving in the foreign policy space, but I also um, dabbled in other spaces as well when I was making content. I never became very prominent, but I was very involved in Twitter and stuff, and I met Kevin through this space, and I've always found him to be very interesting and uh, very, very insightful, and very entertaining for sure. So, Kevin, feel free to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So, everybody who's going to be watching this now and later, I'm Kevin Castley. I do political, economic, and news content in addition to gaming content over on X, Twitch, and YouTube. You can find me on X at Kevin Castley. You can find me on YouTube and Twitch at Superpower Broadcasting. So, I've, of course, been interested in foreign policy for a while. I have a degree in political science focused on international relations, in addition to a degree in economics. And so that's a little bit of my background there. It's good to be here. It's been a little while since John and I have streamed together. It's been quite a long time since I've really done fairly consistent streaming, interviews, that sort of stuff. Took about a year and a half kind of break there. As you know, if you follow me over on X, I've done some recent content. I interviewed a man, John Jackman, a couple weeks ago. We talk politics and international relations, but here I am being now the one interviewed. So this will be fun. So So
Yeah,
there we go.
yeah. Uh, I think what kind of always interested me in their content heaven was just like their ability to like when we were doing foreign policy content back in the day, they would always find a way to like find these like uh make these very salient points, but do that in like um, do it in a way where it was very funny and very easy to digest. So like one example I will always talk about is when he would give like nicknames to people. Um, so of the people who were criticizing, and
Yeah.
is that something that how do you start to like um it how did you like develop yourself into doing that and like
The
did
nicknames?
you always like see yourself as like someone who uh like see yourself as someone who um sorry I'm losing my words
Oh yeah.
see yourself as someone who like is sort of like a funny guy or do you always have you always envisioned yourself as someone who's more serious and more stoic because I've
Yeah.
seen both sides but I
Yeah,
don't think I've
yeah.
ever
About well, I mean, you can talk to anybody I went to like middle school with or whatever. I was always kind of a joker, but I was also kind of a serious person too. So for me, I don't consider myself a comedian, but a lot of people kind of regard me in that sort of sphere. I look. Here's the reality, okay? Ever since I was pretty young, like we're talking like 10 years old or earlier, basically when I got uh, my first sort of shock into politics, political awareness was September 11th, 2001. I didn't know what politics were before then, and after that, I knew what they were. And I didn't really know. I was a kid, right? I didn't really know like the
yeah.
nuances of politics, but I had a sense of the world in a different way than just being like a kid, where it's just about like playing with toys and stuff like that. Things got a little bit more serious after that. Stuff like war,
Mhm.
these sorts of things kind of came up, and so I've been kind of aware of the brutal nature of the world for a long time, obviously. But I also enjoy comedy. I like having a laugh, and I've always kind of been aware of the temporary nature of literally everything around us, ourselves, the universe, etc. And so while we're here, we might as well try to, crack some jokes, have some fun, that sort of
Yeah.
stuff, while at the same time acknowledge, look, the world is extremely brutal. Everything in the world is extremely brutal, and we make the universe as a species and in our societies oftentimes we make it so much more brutal than it even needs to be, that to compensate for that, I like to make people laugh, but I'm a very serious person, but I
Yeah.
find memes and jokes kind of come naturally to me, but I've never really kind of thought of myself as like a comedian per se.
Mhm.
But I like memes. I like to laugh. I like to make people laugh. And when there's something just stupid or absurd or beyond parody, and that's going to be a series I'm starting soon, Beyond Parody, going over the ridiculousness of life under neoliberal capitalism in Canada. We look, you can't help but to point out the ridiculous nature of it, and the best way to often do that, it's not to be toxic, it's not to be depressed, it's not to cry on stream. It's you gotta do some jokes and memes basically,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
yeah, you have the people going. So people like to laugh. So hopefully that answers the
Um,
question.
no, I think it's a very interesting segue. I was thinking about that because uh I've always been interested in comedy as sort of like a way to like look at the world critically.
Yeah.
But it's also like a way to sort of like we have the luxury about joking about things with regards to the world because we don't have to bear the consequences. of whatever happens in the world whenever we make these jokes. But I always found comedy to be a very interesting way to reflect opinions about the world. Are there are there comedians that you're inspired by, or like are there comedians that you watch or still watch, or like
Yeah,
um
that's a good question because basically everybody that I watch these days, I would kind of put in a similar category to me, where they're part times very serious, and other times they're about the memes and jokes. So one
mhm,
example, of course, would be Vosh. I don't agree with him on a lot, but I watch him almost every day because he's charismatic and funny, and he's somebody who represents a political area that I largely disagree with, but I've always kind of eschewed the echo chamber. Another person would be sometimes I'll watch Alex Jones. He's a pretty funny guy. He's pretty
really?
funny. So on the
I
other
would
side,
not
you got
expect that
you got
actually.
Alex Jones, and so. But when I was younger, I used to like George Carlin quite a bit. Now I haven't watched him in quite a while, but
Well,
I always
he's
felt
kind of dead,
yeah,
like
I know, but
literally
I mean,
dead.
like, even the what would you call it, the reruns and stuff. I just haven't kept up with rewatching his stuff. I know some people they still watch his stuff, because he was a class act when it came to comedy. Who
Oh
else is
god, yeah.
there? I would say uh largely just for YouTubers in general, even more serious ones, they tend to have a knack for making making ridiculous stuff funny, right? And
Mhm,
even if a lot of it is kind of serious. I mean, uh Simon Whistler, somebody who there's no way he would ever consider himself a comedian. He's got some
mhm,
funny stuff, right? He covers everything. He kind of has like my dream job. He's got like 20 different YouTube channels on different subjects and stuff because he's got the time for it. So he'll make videos about mega projects, huge tunnels and
right.
stuff like that. He'll do content on wars. He'll do content on a ton of different stuff. And he can crack jokes like on the fly. He's pretty good. Who
Right.
else is there? Who else is there? I mean, Dylan Burns. I disagree with him on a ton of stuff. He's a pretty funny guy. He
Mhm.
can be funny when he needs to be. So
Yeah, he can be pretty funny, yeah.
all these guys that are very generally do pretty serious content, they all have this funny element to them that just kind of comes naturally. But I don't really watch like dedicated career comedians anymore. Like the last one I was
Mhm.
into was George Carlin, for reference. So
Yeah, so I feel like George Carver is a very good choice because like he I mean, towards the end of his career, in the middle of his career, I feel like I think there was like there was a time he was like addicted to drugs and like a really bad alcoholic, and then he came back in like the early 2000s, late 1990s, and he did all of these he did all of these really good sketches on atheism and like criticizing Christianity and making fun of the state of the world. And like he just had incredible dinners. Well, left and right. And so I feel like George Carlin is like a classic choice. Um, personally, like I identify more with like Jerry Seinfeld, but like or uh uh
yeah, Seinfeld's great.
yeah.
Yeah, Seinfeld's a classic, absolutely. I mean, he's in many ways a pioneer in that industry. But to kind of get back to the line of question there, so I don't really consider myself a comedian. Like, if you ask me, would I rather be known as funny or serious? I'd rather be known for the serious content that I put out there. But at the same
Mhm.
time, let's be real. Let's be real, right? Like, we're on the internet here. People that might be watching this, they might have some sort of aspiration to gain a following down the road. Nobody's going to pay
Mhm.
attention to you at all if all you ever post is serious stuff. How are you ever going to get attention, right? I mean, let's
Yeah.
keep it real. I like debates. Debates are a great way to gain a following. And you want to stand out in a
Yeah.
debate, you got to take some jabs. You want to take jabs effectively, you can't just be toxic. You have to be funny. And so, you might be able to get a job in this sort of industry of politics if you become like a political consultant or something. But
Consultant or like a
chances are your
journalist
your parents
or
have got to have a
whatever,
lot of
yeah.
money for you to ever be considered in that industry. And so if you're just a regular Joe and you're trying to make a name for yourself, You got to be funny. You got to be willing to take jabs. You got to be willing to dish them out. You got to be able to get attention and gain notoriety. You're not going to get that if you're just doing dry analysis, unless your parents are like old money and they can hook you up with a job in Washington. If you're like the rest of us, and you want to get a following from nothing, you got to start from the bottom. And the only way you're going to do that, the only way you're going to get attention, the only way you're going to get views is if you can get stuff to stick. And you know what sticks? A good nickname. And you know who really pioneered this? You know who, in a way, it's kind of the ultimate manifestation of what I was
Oh, it's
talking about.
Donald
The
Trump, right?
combination of serious and comedian is Donald Trump. Because Donald
Yeah.
Trump is who I was originally inspired by in that regard. Donald Trump is the GOAT. He's the OG. He so effortlessly is able to literally destroy someone's political career with a nickname he came up with on the fly in 2 seconds. Whereas Jeb, for example, low energy Jeb, had to hire numerous consultants, pay them huge money. Now, granted, it wasn't his money, it was his donors' money. So I guess good for him. He managed
Mhm.
to fleece a bunch of rich oil barons. Great, great. Good job, Jeb. What did Jeb do? Jeb had some consultants and they said, look, this is bad. Your polls are tanking ever since Donald Trump called you low energy. By the way, Donald Trump didn't need consultants to come up with that. He just came up with that because that's his natural talent. He's a genius when it comes to comedy. And
Mhm.
and so what does Jeb do to retaliate? He's got to do something. So he's got this team of high-powered, high-paid consultants, and they spend weeks and they come up with, okay, you know what we could do to make people not think you're low energy, make them think you're high energy? We take your name, the Jeb thing, and we make the J lowercase so it's more youthful. And then at the end, we put an exclamation mark on it. So that way people think you're high energy. He probably paid over $1 million for that. And did it work? No. You know what worked? A 2 second nickname on the fly tanked his political career, potentially forever. So good job,
Yeah,
Donald
after
Trump. You you
2015,
you potentially saved
that does
America
not
from a
want her.
president that might have started another massive war. So good job to Trump there. So, and it
Yeah.
took two
Well,
seconds. It took him 2 seconds. $0 in 2 seconds. And by the way, he has the money to afford that. Jeb didn't. He had to get his billionaire donors to do it. So, and they did. So in that sense, I mean, I almost kind of have to add into Jeb too. You managed to redistribute wealth from a bunch of old money oil barons to a bunch of old money consultant kids. Great. Okay. Okay, but no, he's a funny guy. I like Donald Trump. So the funny guy, and I'm not even
yeah.
talking politics here. It doesn't
No, no,
matter what your
no.
it doesn't matter what your politics are. You have if you can't acknowledge that he's a funny guy, then you're like one of those like Trevor Noah, Trump man bad, Mueller can still win people who you're never going to be funny. Like on
Yeah.
the other end, I see somebody like Rachel Maddow. She's just not funny. Now, granted, she doesn't try to be funny, and it's okay. Not everybody needs to be funny. When you make $30 million a year, to not be funny, you don't need to even try to be funny. But she's not funny.
Yeah.
Just so we're clear, she's not funny. She's kind of on the other end of that spectrum. So if you
Mhm.
want to watch dry, bitter, toxic analysis, you can go to her. Or if you want to keep it real, you can be like, yeah, no, he's a funny guy. You might not like him, but he's a funny guy. You gotta acknowledge he's like a funny guy, basically. Like I can
Yeah.
acknowledge people I disagree with are funny or charismatic.
Mhm.
I would say with regards to charisma, right? I was talking
Mhm.
about Vosh. I don't agree with him on very much, but he's a charismatic guy. He wouldn't have 500K followers if he wasn't charismatic, if he wasn't funny. So,
Well, I
anyway,
feel like
yeah.
recently, I feel like Voss is having some trouble, but
Well, he lost about 1% of his followers, but that still shows the knack he has for
to keep all
comedy
those people on.
and for charisma. Because guess what? If you're like some random, dry, boring dude and all those scandals come up about you, you're gonna lose
Well,
more than 1% of your followers.
look at
Vosh
James
is
Somerton.
invincible.
James,
He's
the,
invincible because people think he's funny and people think he's good at speaking, and because of that, he can do anything and he'll still have 500,000 followers. So that's impressive. That's objectively
yeah.
impressive. So
I think right after looking at what happened to James Somerton, I think it's sort of a testament of like how quickly your career can fall. Because that guy like plagiarized like videos and videos and essays and videos
more
for
attention.
years.
More attention, more
Yeah,
views, more money, right? So if anything, he's going
yeah.
to gain from it in the end. So,
No,
good job,
I'm talking
Vosh.
about James. I'm talking about James Somerton.
Oh no, I don't. Okay, I was talking about Vosh. I don't actually know who Summerton is. I think I might have seen a Vosh video about it, but I didn't know anything about Summerton, so I didn't watch it. Who's Summerton?
James Somerton was like one of these BreadTube video essayists who did like you know content on LGBTQ plus stuff. But then like Ace Bomber guy released a video maybe about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. About it was like a 3 hour video about how all these really big YouTubers plagiarized, and Somerton was like half of that video.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, and then this person this person said like, hey, like people people sort of predicted that like, oh, he was gonna like leave the internet or whatever, and he kind of has. People actually also I don't know if it's still up in the air, but he may have you know off himself. But that is still. I don't think he has, but that was like a thing for a while as well, and like people were blaming Ace Bomber High for he made this video of James Somerton, like you're responsible for like his misery or whatever, and
Well,
uh
was Summerton guilty of plagiarism or not?
I think it is, yes,
Well, then if you're guilty of something and somebody makes a video about it, then such is life.
yeah,
May don't do
yeah,
the thing then. I don't know. May don't plagiarize then, James, if he's ever gonna listen to this. So
yeah,
no, I don't
um,
really respect plagiarizers too much, So obviously I have a couple degrees. So we dealt with plagiarism and stuff like that back in the day. I was in university. There were people that would try to plagiarize and stuff like that. Guess what? It always comes to light. It's never
Did you
not going to
ever
come to
have
light.
Turn It In? This is at turnitin.com
Oh, I think this was
for
before
plagiarism.
Turnitin. I don't know. I don't know. But all I can say is, look, there's always been plagiarism. Plagiarists get caught. It's a pretty easy thing to get caught for, right? It's not like you're sneaking
Hmm.
something in the middle of the night and hopefully there's no security cameras around or whatever. No, you're literally publishing whatever it is that you're drawing from without due credit. Well, guess what? Yeah, eventually somebody's going to find that. You're the one who put it out there. It's like
Hmm.
this is like anti-stealth, so it's stupid. So
Yeah, it's not a smart thing to do. However, it's really interesting because AI has actually made plagiarism uh like kind of tough or a lot harder to like recognize.
yeah,
Because
potentially, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, there's
I
a
mean,
debate about that on the ethics side of it. I think most people kind of know where I stand on AI, which is that I think it's good for memes, it's good for propaganda, but it should also probably be regulated from the standpoint of job protection. So my concern about AI is more a matter of its economic impact,
mhm,
more than the ethical nature of it. We always invent stuff that can often be used for unethical purposes, but I'm more concerned about protecting jobs than any of that other stuff. But that's kind of where I'm at with the AI thing. So
yeah, I'm sort of like a at the I'm sort of split between like hey AI can be a really good thing because like um it can it can actually speed up a lot of processes that we have. I know as a developer on my team specifically to ask OpenAI to write some code for you or write the code for you it will if you ask it to debug a certain excerpt of code that you have, it will optimize for you.
okay.
Um, so like it does have like a lot of uses.
Yeah, but
But
even then, you're just talking about using it for debugging purposes. Even that threatens to upend some percentage of
right,
IT
yeah. I
workers'
mean,
jobs, which that is problematic and should be regulated from a government
well,
level.
have you heard about Zevin? the first AI software engineer.
No, I haven't, but that's worrisome. So,
Yeah. They just released it. I think like I don't know if GitHub made it or like some other big company, but they um they have this AI named Devin that they tell it to go do software engineering tasks, and like it will just go do it.
yeah.
Um, and the thing is that like I'm pessimistic about AI because of like everyone's over reliance on it. And like I do have a lot of concern about AI with regards to propaganda, with regards to deepfakes, with regards to um the way that it can make something seem real that which is not real, right? So the whole voice cloning stuff is really insane. When that came out last year, like my mind was blown. Like I didn't realize that we were that far in the future yet. Um,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
but like at the same time, um, like Devin and like these other things that rank code, um, my opinion is that a lot of AI um nowadays. I mean, AI is not like a new concept. It's been around since the 1960s, actually. Like a lot of the same algorithms that they use, like linear algorithms, are from the 1960s. And all that's happened now is that these companies like OpenAI and Google and I guess Meta, I think, has like a system that's similar to Open ChatGPT. Um, these big companies have all these supercomputers and graphics cards that are training and iterating on models at like a very big scale. And at that really big scale, um, they're able to take basically the entirety of the internet and put it into like a system, right? And if that's the case, right, which is kind of what OpenAI is, OpenAI becomes the ultimate bullshitter. So when it's able to produce output and it sounds good, but when you check it lots of times, it's not what the optimal solution. It's not what a human would do. It's not what like um like I know like AI. You can use AI to make music, right? I've used it before. This was like a um just because I've just been interested in that, and like it sounds funny, but it doesn't really sound like an actual song that like someone would actually make, you know. Um, like at this point you can hear the imperfections of
Yeah. See, that's the thing, right? I know AI is imperfect, and obviously we had the whole Willie's chocolate experience debacle from last month that was just hilarious. But look, here's the
oh
thing, right? Here's the thing.
yeah.
My concern about it is not where it's at right now, it's where it's gonna be at in 2 or 3 or 4 years. And I'm telling you, if there is not some FDR tier level approach to regulate this, you're going to have a new Great Depression unfold. Because guess what? If you can render 30 or 40% of the economy to be redundant to the point where it doesn't even make sense to pay them anymore, then if they're not with the government, they're going to get fired. And then guess what happens? Now you've got a 30% unemployment rate. Now, guess what happens? Look at all of the downwind effects of that. Look at what happened in the Great Depression. How did we get out of the Great Depression? FDR came in and he gave people work. You might say, well, why do we need this or whatever? Doesn't matter if you need it or not. People had jobs. And when people have jobs, the economy grows. The economy is stable. The economy is predictable. You're able to mend crises. Right now, we're in a scary situation when it comes to AI, where it's not even the technology that's the true uh, inherent threat. It's the political and economic structure and conditions that we've set ourselves in right now, such that it is possible for 40% of people to just be left on the streets because they are deemed to be redundant. And so in that case, there's nobody there for them. Now, if we lived in a more what would you say, a more Keynesian economy, or even a more centrally planned economy, where no matter what happens in the tech space, you're guaranteed to have your job, you're going to be given quotas to do work, we wouldn't have that threat. In fact, if we lived in that world, AI would be a powerful tool to augment your productivity and increase human productivity. But we don't live in that world. We live in a world of cost cutting. We live in a world of private interests, and those private interests are counter to you having bread tomorrow if the AI is able to replace your job. And so I'm scared of AI, not because I'm worried about what it can do or can't do. I know eventually it'll be capable of doing a lot of very great things. I'm worried that instead of being a tool to augment our productivity, it's going to be used as a tool to bring millions of people into homelessness and poverty, because we've created an artificial structure of an economic system such that that is the incentive that's in place there. We don't have a large scale public works program there. We don't have a true job safety net. We might have a welfare system, but that's not going to handle a 40% unemployment rate. The only thing that can handle that is getting that unemployment rate down. How do you do that? You create public works projects. So anyway, that's kind of my thoughts on this. And if you're out there and you don't have millions of dollars in your bank account, your daddy's bank account, this should concern you. You should be kind of upset that you were born into an economic configuration in which your boss is looking for any possible way to not have to pay you tomorrow, and in which the government is totally okay with that. This is kind of a problem. And this is not a way to run a cohesive society in the long run. It might be a way to maximize bucks for a couple generations, but you will not be able to achieve national greatness on this system, and you will not be able to sustain that system in perpetuity. It might take 30 years, it might take 50 years, but eventually there would be a revolt. You can't have 30% unemployment rate sustained. It's not possible. FDR knew that. He knew there would be a revolution in America. That's why he created the public works project. So, yeah, that's kind of my
Yeah,
thoughts
I don't
on that.
know.
So,
I have a little bit of like a more. I see where you're coming from, but I have a little bit of a more positive take on AI in that I feel like humans, while they are sort of indisposed to AI and like it's going to be innovated into more things, um, I feel like we're sort of seeing this phenomenon with like uh we thought that social media and like apps were like the end game, and everyone's just gonna be on apps for all of eternity. And but we thought that for probably like 15 years, but now it's like it's like a mainstream opinion that social media is a very toxic place and it's very unhealthy for you. So I feel like humans will find other alternatives to uh yeah, I think humans will find other alternatives to whatever obstacles are shown towards them. So I guess like in the AI space, um, there may not be as many um uh there may not be as many engineers who come in who necessarily are sitting there and typing at the keyboard all the time. But um, the meaning of what it means to be a software engineer might change. Um,
yes, but the overall job numbers will go down. This is the problem with the private economy, is that it's not as simple as, well, they'll do other work now. No, they'll just outright be replaced by the robot, which again, from a productivity level, is fine. You could argue that output might increase. My concern is the people who don't have bread the next day. That's why I say, as long as we have a majority private economy, we're setting ourselves up for an artificial disaster from AI. Again, AI doesn't have to be a problem. I think China is going to use it for great benefits, but us, we have the potential of bringing on a new Great Depression, because we just don't have job security in the West in a way that they do in China, or that they do in other countries that have a more a more centrally organized economy. So
Yeah. I think we've gotten a little bit off topic, but
yeah, no, I would agree with that. I'm just saying that fundamentally, when people think of AI, you shouldn't just think of memes. You shouldn't just think of
no, no, no,
you shouldn't
no.
just think about it in terms of that. You need to think of it in terms of how do we avoid ending up like 1936? And the way that we do that is to ensure what I would say basically is there needs to be legislation passed to guarantee work. This might sound radical, but what there really needs to be is it doesn't matter if you're going to be laid off by your tech firm or whatever, there will be a job for you. It made as relevant as it can for the public good, so that you're not going to be homeless the next day if AI replaces your job. It might be building dams, it might be constructing highway, it might be building high-speed rail lines, but there needs to be public works projects for people, or even a wider scale military conscription for people whose jobs are gone. There can't just simply be this approach of, well, they should have done better coding or whatever. It's coming for your job. Unless you're old money, it's coming for your job. So that's the reality. It's not something you can just work harder to get away from. The AI will eventually be able to replace you. We need a systematic level to address this, to transform the threat of AI into an advantageous augment of our productive capacity. So that's where I stand on that. And I think China's doing a much better job of that than we are right now. So
It's interesting to say that. Um, why do you think so? In, in terms of China versus the US.
why?
Yeah.
Because they don't have they have the ideological mechanisms to allow for that in a way that we don't. Now granted, they're still a largely private economy, but it's much more organized and regulated at a government level. They're not able to what would you say, they're not able to tolerate that degree of I guess what would you say, feebleness with respect to these new technologies. They're much more interested in controlling it. We're much more of a free for all with regards to this here. And so AI is much more of a threat to you if you live in the United States or Canada than it is if you live in China or Vietnam. It just fundamentally is. We just don't have the ideological um, uh, infrastructure to allow for mass mobilization in that way. So if you lose your
The
job here, you're
other,
done basically. So
yeah, I mean, I felt like read recently, like maybe like a year ago, that a lot of the big the tech companies have to cover and like try and position OpenAI to like stop development. Because I'm pretty sure like, OpenAI was like a lot of those AI technologies were a lot more accessible last year. Um, and I believe there was maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think like Elon Musk and like a bunch of other CEOs of tech companies had to cover and made this position to slow down the development of AI because of this exact problem. Um, I'm very very pessimistic about it, but I guess I'm not as pessimistic as you are because I know that people are thinking about it. It's not like people don't think that it's a problem. Obviously, they think that it is. Um, and I um, uh, I think at this point, AI is mostly being used as an aid, and I'm not sure. I think the developers of the at OpenAI and other places are fully aware of this issue. Um, and I know you probably don't trust them, and that's fine. But at this point, AI is just being used as an aid.
yeah, right
Um,
now, but it's in the process of being at a capacity to replace your job. So here's the thing, right? I'm not. To me, it's irrelevant whether the developers are aware of it or not. They could be negligent. They could be fully aware. It doesn't matter as long as you don't have the governmental and policy infrastructure in place to provide for people once they are laid off due to AI, it's irrelevant to me. That's not going to pay your rent. That's not going to put bread on your table. It's that simple. So
Was you I'm just interested, was you being in support of like a uh um I forgot the name of it, but it's a system that distributes wealth to people, so sort of like has like a
you're talking
replace.
UBI?
Yes, UBI, yes. Sorry.
Yeah, no, the problem in UBI, couple issues with UBI. One, Bill Gates doesn't need $1,000 a month. Two, I use 1,000 because that's what Andrew Yang and the Yang Gang were all on about when they brought it into the political fore in American politics. Two, $1,000 a month. That's going to cover what? 15 days of living in a tiny basement suite with no bedroom in Canada. So that's not going to pay anything for you, $1,000 a month. And three, it doesn't actually really add any value to the economy if you're just sitting at home getting your $1,000 a month and then you're homeless the other 15 days. Like I use that because $1,000 a month, even though it would cost a lot to run, that's not even gonna pay your rent. It's not even gonna come close to paying your rent. So never mind your food, your utilities, etc. Never mind having any savings. So
Yeah. I
what
think
I'm
it
more
is
interested in is a right to work. The protection and freedom from unemployment ever being something that you ever have to contend with. And so I would say you lose your job from AI. Okay, we've got a job for you. That's simple. Or, some people they might say, well, they would regulate companies to say you can't fire people off or lay people off due to AI. Okay, then they'll just not hire people anymore. So we can't really do it that way. What we need to do is to use the AI as more of an augment, which means expanding the size of the government workforce from whatever it is now to maybe 8 or 10 times that level and putting those people to actually improving our country. We can put the country to work. We can put the country to work, John. We can build high-speed rail. We can build public housing. We can build artillery. We can build everything we need for our survival and prosperity. And we can do this with the refuse of the private market as a result of AI.
yeah.
There's no reason why people need to be unemployed, but we don't have the ideological capacity to do that because we're dominated by essentially billionaires and they control our government. So they'll never do that. So
Well, I think we got off on a very big tangent, but I wanted to. The main thing I wanted to ask you was one of the main things I wanted to ask you was you used to be kind of like when you started all this. Um,
sorry, what?
uh, when you started all of this and you started making content online and all of this, like you consider yourself as like a public neoconservative. Is that accurate?
In 2020, I used the label, but you'll know it if you go back to those old tweets that are out there. I call myself a liberal neocon. I was never a
Mhm.
conservative, right?
Right,
I
yeah,
looked at neoconservatism in terms of the framework of foreign policy is spreading democracy, essentially. So that
yeah.
was where I stood back then. Obviously, that doesn't describe my politics today, and it hasn't even described
Right.
my politics for about 3 years now. But yes, that's correct. At a time when I was starting out making content, I consider myself to have a neocon persuasion on world affairs. Yeah. So
Yeah. So like now I guess you're sort of like a populist of like an independent populist or
yeah,
of some kind.
I don't really have
Uh,
like a political home. I don't have a party affiliation. I would say the label populist that kind of gets thrown around out there. I don't reject it. If you find that to be a good descriptor to understand my politics, that's great. I believe in politics that serves the people. I would say I don't really use ideological labels per se. I don't really regard myself as having an ideology. I think ideological rigidity is a problem that it functions to enclose us in ways that prevent us from exploring options outside the box that could be more conducive to our victory and prosperity. And so for me, the few labels that I use that would kind of generally describe my politics would be progressivism and nationalism. But that doesn't mean I think, uh, every other country is horrible or something. It just means my politics are centered on the prosperity of the Canadian people. But if I lived in China or if I lived in Chad, my politics would be
Mhm,
centered on the prosperity of the Chad people, right? So, now I
mhm.
know the adjective for the demonym is Chadian, but Chad just sounds like if your country's Chad, you should just call them Chads. They should just
Yeah, so,
change their official demonym to Chads.
not the country is not beta. It's
No, no,
not
no.
beta
It's like
still.
imagine having a country Chad. Like I know they speak French, but it's like just call it Chads. Why does it have to be Chadians? Just call them Chads. So
I guess like I'm interested in that transition of like coming from like a liberal neocon to like a populist, and like was that like a combination of like personal experiences plus like um just encounters you've had online with people, or just debates you saw? Was it like a watershed moment? Um,
yeah,
or was it like a mix of all of those?
yeah, that's a great question. Um, it's actually to me, it's kind of a logical trajectory. There's the old saying in neocon circles that a neocon is a liberal who was mugged by reality, basically making fun of the liberals who hold to a more Dylan Burns type worldview of, well, we can just get the
Mhm,
UN and NGOs to solve the world and make the world a better place, versus neocons who say, no, we actually sometimes you need to send in the troops to make the world a better place. But their framework, their right there was always kind of around, hey, look, we've seen how the real world is, and we're prepared to address and meet the world as it demands of us in a way that the liberals aren't capable of. And from that, well, I would argue that, somebody who's more economically populist, somebody who was also mugged by reality. Because if it's easy to be
mhm,
a liberal if you live in a gated community, but if you have to live with the people, if you have to go to the people, it's easy to get mugged by the economic reality of what the people face. And so for me, the experiences that made me more of a neocon, everything from 9/11 to watching um the just the human rights abuses and stuff happen in the Middle East, that
mhm,
sort of stuff. Likewise, witnessing the economic dilapidation that's been brought upon my country was another mugging moment. It was a moment of realizing, oh yeah, no, uh, things are bad out here, and we need to meet the real world as it requires. We can't just sit in an office. We can't just sit in a gated community and say let them eat cake. We actually have to do politics that serves the people. And so, to me, the referent group, the referent interest, I should say, or the referent cause of making the world a better place, never changed. Believe it or not.
mhm,
When I was a liberal, I thought that we would make the world a better place by spreading our way of life. And now I realize that liberalism is what's caused so much of the damage in our way of life, and that we would be better without it. And so, but the cause of making the world a better place never changed. I When I was a neocon, I believed that that was what would improve human well-being on the aggregate level. And now that I'm more of a progressive, I would say that that's what I believe will improve human well-being at an aggregate level. And so the cause has never really changed. It's always been about making the world a better place. But as new information is brought to light, if we don't adjust our views accordingly, then we're, as I say, we're enclosed by ideological constraints that are fundamentally destructive. I mean, it's those ideological restraints that have actually brought about the collapse of countries in the past before. They were too
mhm,
blinded by ideology to save themselves. And then you look at other countries that are more ideologically flexible, where they're able to adapt to things and they're able to use change to their advantage, and you see the prosperity that they're able to generate because they don't subscribe to any one particular set of, we have to do this no matter what. No, they go with the flow and they do what must be done to serve the people. And so that's kind of where I'm at, but it's still fundamentally about serving the people. So
mhm. So I guess like leading into my next question, um, I'm wondering like with like ideologies, like um, we have like liberalism, we have progressivism, we have conservatism, and then like we have like this Overton window that kind of protects like the like extreme conversations and like taboo conversations.
Yeah.
Um, and um, I'm not sure like how involved we were in having those types of taboo conversations in the past. I know we've had them before, um, but um,
Which taboo topics?
um, I, I guess like um, if you're going really far left, that is stuff like um, is communism is feasible, this sort of stuff, or like to go far to the right is like race realism stuff,
Okay.
um. And I'm wondering, like, does the orbital window matter? And like, does it matter to you when you look at the world, or
Yeah.
do you just look at the world as is without that
As is,
filter?
if we limit ourselves to working within an Overton window, look at what it's done to the United States. In the United States, there's what's often described as a uniparty. Up until the election of Donald Trump, you basically had one party in the US. There were the Republicans that served the billionaires, and there were the Democrats that served the billionaires. And the Overton window, yeah, they would disagree on things like abortion. They would disagree on, you know, largely meme issues that didn't really matter at the end of the day, issues that don't pay your bills, right? But fundamentally, on the economic infrastructure of how the US was going to be configured, they both agreed. They both upheld neoliberal capitalism. And you had the election of Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Donald Trump and Joe Biden are protectionists. Donald Trump and Joe Biden are
Yeah.
populists. Donald Trump and Joe Biden are people who actually want to reverse the outsourcing process that dominated the US for 40 years. And so now you have this different political configuration and Overton window in the US where, because of Donald Trump's rhetoric against the consensus, because for about 40 years, the Overton window was, we support abortion rights and want to outsource your job, versus we don't support abortion rights and want to outsource your job. Now Donald
Hmm.
Trump comes in and he's like the most progressive Republican ever elected. He doesn't really care about religion. He's never read the Bible. He'll use abortion to get claps, but he doesn't care about it. And I'm sure he's paid for abortions in the past. I'm sure he thinks it's cool. You know, there's a guy who hangs out with like Miss America and stuff like that and everything, right? Like there's a guy who likes to party, right? He's definitely paid for some abortions in the past, right? So he's a pretty open-minded kind of person, but he likes to get claps. And he comes in, he's like, no, 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 no. Actually, the outsourcing is bad. We want to bring your jobs back and make America great again. And the thing that's great about this is that his rhetoric was so powerful and so popular, it actually forced the Democrats to now shift to that Overton window, where the Overton window at the leadership level in the US now is actually pretty populist. But the Overton window of the party establishments is the opposite. It's still pro outsourcing, it's still pro neoliberal capitalism. But the outsourcing of Donald, or the Overton window of Donald Trump and Joe Biden, is like on the other side of this. They're actually fairly pro working class. And so you're
Yeah.
for the first time in 40 years having a dramatic shift spurred on by these great leaders in Donald Trump and Joe Biden to change the Overton window. But I'll tell you, it's extremely difficult to change an Overton window, because unless you're at the level of like president or presidential candidate that's getting a lot of votes, you're not going to be able to change that Overton window. And this is why it was the way it was for so long, because the only way that anybody could ever change that was a hugely wealthy outsider coming in and breaking it. That's the only way you could do it. And Donald Trump was the man America needed at that hour. And now you're never going to go back. You're never going to go back. You're not going to, Hillary Clinton, if she tries to run again, she's going to get like 10 votes. Nikki Haley tried to run on raising your retirement age and defending the outsourcing. And guess what? She got like 30% or
Yeah, so
something.
not walloped. Yeah.
No, it's not going to work. But she would have won if she ran in 2012. She would have won if she ran in 2008. She would have won if she ran in 1998. This is the power of the Overton window. The Overton window is very difficult to change, but once you start moving it, that inertia is hard to stop. And so now the Overton window in America it's hard to bring it back. It's going to be really hard for the Mitt Romneys and the Clintons of the world to ever get people to think neoliberalism is cool again. So, and you have Donald Trump and Joe Biden largely to thank for that. So, does the Overton window matter for me when it comes to viewing the world? No, but does it matter when it comes to understanding why things are the way they are? Absolutely. And America's Overton window and Canada's Overton windows are so constrained that it's actually, I would argue personally, it's actually a threat to national security. And I'll tell you why. It's actually unfolding right now in Ukraine, the consequences of this. Now, we're not being invaded in Canada or the US right now, but if we were, it would happen here too. In Ukraine right now, Ukraine is infamously short on troops. They don't have the troops parity with Russia to sustain anything other than barely holding back the Russians. Now the Russians, for reference, are gaining about 500 meters a day, and they've been at this rate since about the summer. And so
Mhm.
now, how do you hold that back? Well, you get troops parity. We know when it comes to taking a defensive line, you need about a 3-to-1 advantage in troops numbers. Right now, Russia has a slight advantage, but it's not that great. It's not good enough to really gain a ton of ground.
Mm.
Ukraine does not have anywhere near the numbers at any part of the front to actually gain ground. So Ukraine needs more people. Now, here's the question. You've got a country of 38 million people. You've got a lot of young people that you could conscript. Do you do it? Now, most countries that value their self preservation in a time of existential conflict where they might not exist in a year, they're willing to do some pretty drastic measures. But
Mm.
if you are constrained by an ideology that limits your options, you can do some pretty dumb things. Consider the ideology of the Nazis, for example. They took some pretty dumb moves in World War II that they would not have taken if it weren't for their ideology. In fact, if they hadn't been so anti Semitic, for example, they might have been able to get nuclear weapons. But that ideology prevented them from getting nuclear weapons. They were too ideologically rigid, they were too committed to their anti Semitism to make a country that Jews felt comfortable to live in. So they left. They went to the United States and other countries to do their research. And so for Ukraine now, they are too ideologically confined to neoliberal capitalism, where Zelensky famously fired um, Valery Zelensky, who was the commander of the ground forces. And what did Zelensky say? He said, look, we need to conscript about 500,000 troops in order to have the proper advantage to start gaining back territory. And Zelensky said no. And why did Zelensky say no? Zelensky refused and, in fact, went on to fire Zelensky, fired the most popular man in Ukraine. He fired him, right? He was, well, he's the most popular man with the military. The general public didn't like him
Right,
too much,
yeah.
but the soldiers loved him because he was the one out there begging Zelensky to conscript, because he knew the soldiers were tired, they were worn out, they were sick of risking their life every day on the front and not have the conscription happen. And Zelensky refused. He refused to do the conscription. What did he do? He fired him. And why did Zelensky refuse it? You may ask. I mean, Ukraine might not even exist in a year. What the hell is so important that you can't conscript 500,000 young men to go out there and save your country from an existential threat? I'll tell you what, McDonald's profits. He needs young people to be working at these foreign multinational companies to keep the economy going, so to speak. That he's not going to take the youth out of their jobs. These fundamentally meaningless, vapid jobs, because he wants to have this air of normalcy and foreign profits, foreign companies' profits that he's not even going to see. Ukraine isn't even going to see, rather than conscript them into the front lines. Now, imagine if it was World War II, right? Soviets have just crossed the border, and you're out there, you got a job, you're working, you're making borscht at a restaurant in Moscow, right? And you're like 22. And
Mhm.
then if you find out, oh my God, the Nazis, they've crossed the border, they're invading us, what's going to happen? And then Stalin comes out there and he says, it's okay, keep making borscht, your boss needs to make more money. And then your whole country gets overrun by Nazis. No, that's not what happened. He conscripted everybody to go there and fight, and they won, and they repelled the Nazis, and they saved Europe from fascism. Is Zelensky doing that? No, no. He wants those corporate profits to still be made. So he's actually so blinded by liberal ideology, liberal brain rot, that he might get Ukraine to not even be a country anymore because those young people so desperately needed to keep making McDonald's a ton of money to continue operating in Ukraine. Now, I use McDonald's as an example, it's other companies too, but this is what I'm saying. The nation should come first. But the Ukrainian state serves corporations. Corporations don't serve the state. And it's embarrassing. And so when I talk about the Overton window or the ideological rigidity, I'm dead serious when I say it can cost you your country. Because if Ukraine was more socialist, those people would be out on the front lines because the country would come first. The people would come first. But right now, McDonald's comes first. Those young people are out there flipping burgers while the average age of the guys on the front lines is close to 45. How the hell does that make any sense? It only makes sense if your concern is their foreign profits over your national survival. And this might sound like there's no way that's true. Go and look it up. He fired Valery Zaluzhny and refuses to
I
conscript.
know he fired him, but
Yeah. No, I'm telling you,
but
man, ideological rigidity, man, you commit to that, they'll lose you a war. Because Russia, they are happy to take you out of your job and put you on the front lines. And guess what? For them, it's not even an existential war. Their country's not going to potentially not exist tomorrow as a result of it. But Ukraine, this is an existential conflict. And Zelensky is more concerned with McDonald's profits than putting those guys on the front to fight back the invaders.
I'm
Mind-boggling.
not
That
sure
would
if I would
never
I
that
would
would
be as
never have happened in the
unfavorable.
USSR. That would never have happened in North Korea. That would never happen in China. It can only happen in a liberal country. Only a liberal country could put foreign profits over national survival. Unbelievably embarrassing. But I give you that as an
I'm not sure
example
if I would be
of
that
why ideology
unfavorable
is
to.
so constricting. So
I'm not sure if I would be that unfavorable to Zelensky, just based on what I've read. Now, granted, I'm not. I've sort of separated myself from a lot of this discourse, but
oh, it's
from what I've read
depressing.
from
Yeah, it's very
sorry,
depressing discourse. A lot of people are dead. Upwards of 300,000 people are dead in a war that was completely preventable. It's a disgrace. I don't even like to think about it. Like think about all those people, even the survivors that lost their limbs, lost their arms and stuff. Some of them still have to fight like that because of a war that could have been avoided if Ukraine had just kept their nuclear weapons. It's depressing. So.
yeah, but I'm not sure if it's charitable to say that he only cares about profits. I mean, uh he
And
did
why isn't he conscripting?
because I think there's a consideration that every leader has to take, um, right? Either conscription or or the decision to institute normalcy. I don't agree with what Zelensky did here
Okay.
personally, but I'm not sure if like assigning this language to him, like he's a fanatic or he's like a he's someone who is ideologically brain dead. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I would assign that attribute to him.
Then why
Because
no why hasn't he done it? Because there's nothing normal. His country might not exist in a year, and he still cares more about keeping those
well,
people, the
they
young
said in the
people.
article that he didn't consider it. Um, but he made a calculation that maintaining normalcy was probably the for some reason a better course to go. I wouldn't
But
say
that's like
that
such a
he's.
liberal attitude, though. That's going to cost him his country potentially.
I'm
That's
not saying I
embarrassing.
agree with him.
Okay,
I'm
okay.
saying that I'm not sure if the language that he used to describe people who disagree with like fanatic or
But it
like
is
in
fanatical.
politics, 50% of politics now is optics and how you say things, right? So when I think of fanatics, I think of like the Hare Krishnas and like religious fanatics and political fanatics, right? And I'm not sure if Zelensky fits that label. Now, I can probably say, hey, I think Zelensky had a lapse in judgment that could turn into a very grave mistake, but I wouldn't say it's because of his ideological marriage to neoliberalism. I would just say, well, I think he just made a lapse in judgment.
But that lapse
Um,
in judgment is probably going to cost him his country. And the question is why? Because if he wasn't a liberal, would he make the same decision? Probably not. If he was a nationalist, probably not. He would put the people on the front. He wouldn't keep them working at McDonald's while the Russians are closing it. It just doesn't make sense unless your referent interest is foreign profits over your national sovereignty. He's
well,
just
I think
not a
maybe
committed
his interest was just
nationalist.
normalcy. Maybe
What?
his interest was maybe
But
his
you
interest was
can't have
normalcy.
normalcy when your country might not exist in a year. Like if the argument is he doesn't understand the gravity of the situation, I would disagree for the simple reason that he's not Marie Antoinette. He's been on the front. He's visited the troops on the front. I think he knows full well how bad things are. He's visited the troops. He gets informed every day on the war. He knows what's going on. I think it comes from an ideological marriage to the Western neoliberal order to keep people in those jobs as opposed to put them on the front. This would not happen in a country that was less married to that ideology. They would put the people on the front because they would understand that the nation comes first above all else. So,
Yeah, I think we probably have a bit of disagreement here, but
yeah, I'm
I
happy to
am
debate it.
interested.
I'm happy to debate it. So,
Yeah. But I just kind of want to move on the list a little bit.
okay.
Um, but um, so how did you make the decision to come into contact with Jackson Hinkle? I'm very interested in this story because I remember Jackson Hinkle was one of these people who they really despised and who had a lot of problems with, and understandably
When I
so.
was a liberal, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Um, and so what made you decide to contact him and say, "Hey, I want to talk"? Like, was there other content creators um who wanted to talk to before him, or like why him in particular?
Well,
I'm
there's a
just
lot of folks
uh,
I'd like to speak to down the road, but I'm the kind of guy to take an opportunity when it arises. And so I follow more people now on X than I used to. After I started getting like actually a source of income out of X, I changed my policy. I used to only ever follow 99 people. That was like the meme.
yeah.
And
They
then it
had
was
that policy
69.
for a
And then
very
it
long
was
time.
69. It was 69 for the memes. And I'm like, yeah, no, it's 69. And then I got approved for monetization. I'm like, okay, well, this is kind of like a job now. So I'm gonna follow a little more people. I got to network with a lot of people, got to meet some great guys, great women out there, making content on X, and of course, I'd always kept tabs on people I disagree with, but I just didn't have the numbers to follow people I disagreed with. But once I was able to follow more people, now my limit, by the way, for those wondering, do I still have a limit? Yeah, it went from 69, now it's 420, but I'm not there yet. I'm at about 225. It's going to take a couple years to hit 420, but when it does, if I want to follow somebody new, I'll have to unfollow somebody who doesn't make the cut. But that's still a ways off, right? But and of course, if you're on X and you follow people, you see when they're live. And I saw a few people were live. They were having this Q&A space a couple months back, and they were
Mhm.
basically talking about world politics and whatnot. And Samira Khan was one of the hosts, and Jackson Hinkle was there. It was basically ask any questions you want. You disagree. They were having a lot of like Zionists and stuff come up there and ask Jackson questions, and he would debate them and stuff. And I'm like, well, I love debates. I'll
Uh-huh.
come up here. And that was the first and only time I've talked with Jackson so far. And we talked for a few minutes on there. It's probably more about half an hour, but I mentioned to him that we're going to be doing a political theory series starting soon, and he gave me recommendation for that. But yeah, no, I didn't really used to like him too much. I never considered him a grifter, though. Even when I didn't like him, I know a lot of people considered him a grifter. He always struck me as somebody who his politics are genuine. He just happens to change his views. Now, he was somebody who used to be like a surfer dude, Bernie bro in California, and now he works out of Miami and is like, what does he call himself? A MAGA communist, right?
Master
MAGA
communist.
communist. But the thing is it really a grift to go from Bernie left bro to like communism? No, a lot of people go from like more tame Bernie stuff to communism. That happens. I think the thing
I
that
I
it
a
kind of
bit, yeah.
like if you're into Bernie, right? it's not that far of a stretch to think down the road maybe one day you could be a communist. Now I'm not calling Bernie Sanders a communist. I'm just saying that there is a he's a gateway drug to communism, so to speak. And
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Jackson went down that path. I don't think that that's grifting. A lot of people call him a grifter. I don't think he's a grifter. I think he's somebody who saw Bernie lose and thought, that what Bernie was selling was insufficient to get the job done, and so he moved to more radical ends. A lot of people do that. People on the right do that too. That
Yeah.
happens. I think he's somebody who was young and got disillusioned and became a communist, and that happens. So I don't think he's a grifter, but I first kind of came around to take his perspective more seriously when I saw over the summer of last year. I was originally kind of following him, keeping up with him as more of an opponent, but once I saw him really go out there and support the people of Africa that were rising up against French colonization, I liked what he had to say on a lot of it, and a lot of it didn't have anything to do with communism or any of that. It was just about self liberation. It was about national liberation. A lot of these governments aren't communist. None of them are communist over there in Africa. But as somebody who's read a decent amount of what the French have done in Africa over the centuries. Look, if I lived in Africa, I wouldn't be too much of a fan of France. I'm a white dude who lives in Canada, and I'm not too much a fan of what they've done to Africa. So if I was an African dude who lives in Africa, man, I can tell you I probably wouldn't be too much a fan of France. And actually,
Mhm.
for those out there, there is a great YouTube video I finished watching today. It came out a couple days ago. It's by a fellow who goes by the name Real Life Lore. He's got about 5 million subs, I think. And he put out a great video explaining France and Russia's proxy war in Africa. And he spends about the first half an hour of it going over how, look, you thought decolonization happened in the 1960s. Guess what? Here's how France still controls all these countries in Western and Central Western Africa, and it's amazing how much they restricted their growth over the years, how much they deprived those people of any chance to grow. I mean, they were getting almost all of the profits of Niger's uranium for their own nuclear usage in France. And it's like, okay, this is basically the reason why Niger was poor all those years. Yeah, they were independent since the 60s, but were they independent? No, they were only allowed to sell to France, and they had to sell it below a market rate. Now that they have their own government with their own leaders, now they're selling their uranium about 200 times the price of what they were forced to sell it as when they were a neo colony of France. And so Jackson Hinkle was out there basically championing on the people of Burkina Faso, people of Mali, people of Niger, the people of Gabon who were rising up against France. And as somebody who like read about the brutality of what France did in the civil war in Algeria, for example, or the barbarity of their what's his name, Omar Bongo dictatorship for decades in Gabon. Um, to me, it was like, yeah, look, if I lived in these countries, I would be siding with the coup here. Absolutely, they're getting their country back for the first time in centuries, basically. And so Jackson Hinkle was on their side, and so I'm like, look, yeah, I got a lot of disagreements with the guy. But I got a lot of disagreements with a lot of people I support. I'll become a subscriber of his, and so that's how I became a subscriber. And then later on, yeah, I talked with him. But that doesn't mean I agree with him on everything. He's a fairly conservative guy. I'm a lot more of a progressive person. He's a Christian. I'm an atheist, right? But
Mhm.
again, when it comes to the liberation of Africa from colonialization, he was on the right side of that. And so, and not very
Yeah.
many people were talking about that. And often in mainstream media, the revolutions were being depicted as bad because it was a threat to France's CFA economic hegemony, basically. And it's like, okay, but let's stop and ask ourselves a question. Like, as long as we're not biased, like if you have French citizenship and your lights are powered by Nigerian uranium, you've got a bias here. But like, neither of us live in France. I don't think you have French citizenship. I don't. I have like no dog in that race, right? Or no horse in that race, right? And the thing is, so let's just put ourselves in the shoes of people who happen to be born in Niger or born in Mali. is it fair to have to sell your uranium to your quote unquote former colonial master? And you can't sell it to anybody else. You have to sell it to them at 200 times less than the fair price of it. Is that fair? Because that money could have gone to build roads and hospitals and anything to benefit your country. Is that fair? Might you be upset at France? And then the Western response is, you had your decolonization. You're an independent country now, but they never really were. Niger only became an independent country last year for all intents and purposes when the coup happened. So, and Jackson Hinkle supported the coup. So I'm like, you know what? I'll give you a few bucks a month. You're one of the only people out here that's got an audience that's in favor of
Wow,
the coup. So that's kind of how I got in contact with him. So because
interesting.
he championed the
I,
liberation of Africa. It had
I
nothing to do
would
with
never have
communism.
expected.
Nothing to do with communism. It was about African liberation. So
Yeah, I would never expected Jackson Hinkle to talk about anything.
no, he talks about a lot of stuff. He doesn't even talk about communism that often, believe it or not. But that's what he's kind of known for. Is like, oh, he's like the communist grifter or whatever. It's like, okay, so
No, right.
no, but that's the thing
Uh,
with a lot of people. A lot of people are more than just what they're known for in whatever spaces, because
yeah,
usually what you're known for in those spaces is something that's generally considered to be negative. That's usually what people are known for. If you're known on social media, you're generally known for something people think of as bad, it seems. So,
yeah. Actually, that does kind of segue very nicely into my next question. Um, what if it has been known for something? What was it want to be known for? And
yeah.
where do you see yourself in this space?
Sure. So,
Like,
what I want to be known for down the road is an author. I've got a few books I've been working on since, one 2015, one 2007. Problem is, I'm a working class dude. I have to work every day just to survive. I happen to live in Canada, and it's going to be a while before those books get put out there. But that's eventually what I want to be known for. I do this sort of stuff just kind of like on the side to relax after work for the most part and to deal with the
hmm,
world essentially. But I would say above all else, I want to be known for the books I'll be putting out down the road, and hopefully, what again I get turned into a film down the road. I would say so.
what's the may I ask like what the synopsis of those books are?
So I
I
won't go too
don't, I
much
don't think
into
I've ever heard, I
detail,
don't think
but
I've ever heard you. I don't think I've ever heard you talk about this.
yeah, I don't really talk about it too much, but I will eventually be putting them out. One's a two-parter, kind of geopolitical thriller thing set in an alternate universe. The other one is more of a romance, basically, and that one's also a two-parter that has some political themes to it, some economic themes to it. But I want to put those out there, and hopefully, the plan is once I can get the money together to move to the prairies, I can work fewer days. I can do social media as more of a side income and have more free time to devote to working on books. Because I'll tell you, that's something that's kind of hard to do when you're like exhausted every day, basically. So
Yeah.
that's kind of it down the road. So it's kind of a longer term plan, but that's eventually what I'd like to be known for. But in the meantime, when I don't have the time, sort of time to commit to that, I guess what I'm known for now, I would like to be thought of as a champion of the working class. So,
Mhm. And that's really interesting because I thought before coming into this conversation, I honestly thought you were going to say, "Oh, I want to be like a big streamer person, like
oh, sure,
Hassan or
sure.
Vesely or
Yeah, no, then I'd
Voss
be able
or
to take more time and be able to afford to devote my time to writing. Absolutely. But
you know,
look, writing doesn't pay too much as it is, and it's not about the money there. Neither is the social media thing either. Yeah, I'd love to have 1 million followers on here. You know what I'd be able to do? I'd be able to get those books out faster, basically, because it's a bit hard to do when you're working like sometimes 11 hours a day, that sort of stuff, right? So, yeah, no, but yeah, I mean, but that's ultimately fundamentally secondary to this. It's just it's a
mm,
lot easier to make this content than it is that content. That content is a lot more of a
you know,
commitment, and so but I like to do it all, absolutely. But at
mhm,
the end of the day, as I say, I mean, when it comes to my sort of political impact, this was one of the reasons why I really made an effort to switch wheels on politics, because I don't want to be known for anything that I wouldn't sign off on. And so that's kind of why I removed like 95% of the videos I ever made, for example, is because like they just look, the ad revenue, sure, I'll take it, but look, I don't want people to be indoctrinated into an ideology that I don't even believe in anymore. And so I had to remove those. So fundamentally, when it comes down to it, I mean, in the political space, I'd like to be known as somebody who is deeply concerned with addressing the the fact of scarcity. There are a lot of folks out there who treat scarcity like it's something that can just be made to go away. No, it can't. We're always going to have
Well, scarcity is a
we're
part of economics. It's
but
like
we're
one of the
always
basic
going to
laws
have
of
finite
economics. Yeah.
resources, and so long as we have finite resources, we have to understand that every ideology has to contend with that, whether you are a socialist or a fascist or a neoliberal or whatever you are. You have to contend with a limited amount of resources. And so for me, when I look at the world, and a lot of the content in my later book that I'm working on right now is fundamentally predicated on it revolves around the absolute disparity or the desperateness of 70% of the population, basically. And before anybody tells me, well, you know, technically, Kevin, you're in the top 20% of the world by wealth, because you know, even if you're living paycheck to paycheck in Canada, you still have more, you're still in a higher percentage than if you live in Bangladesh. That's BS, and I'll tell you why that's BS. Because if you live in Bangladesh, yeah, your wages are lower, your cost of living is lower. It's not good enough to say, well, you live in America, so you're rich. You're in the world's rich or whatever. No, no, no. If you live in America, you might be worse off than somebody in Chad. You might be poor and living in a slum in N'Djamena in Chad, but you might also have some savings. You might have some stuff. You might technically own your shack in your slum. You might be living paycheck to paycheck in America forever and have to retire at 78 if Nikki Haley has it her way and never own anything and have to be happy. So, in fact, that Chadian that you're like, oh, they're in sub Saharan Africa or whatever, they might actually technically be richer than you because they're not living paycheck to paycheck. So, to me, it's the ratio of your income to cost of living. So, the desperateness of the situation of 70% of even the affluent world, the so-called affluent world, is desperate. If anything goes wrong over your life, you're screwed. And so this is where a lot of my writing kind of comes from, is dealing with the reality on the ground. What does it mean to be born into poverty, where everyone around you is poor, where most people are poor, but you're technically a rich country? What does that mean? And so my later book kind of centers around this. Like, I'm not going to go into too much detail because, look, we were talking
Mhm.
about plagiarism earlier. I don't want people to steal
No,
my
really.
flip. You know what
You
I'm
don't you
saying?
don't go with the serious
But
shit.
but um
Yeah.
but no, the latter book deals with profound economic imbalances, that sort of stuff, and how people might go about surviving in a world that is fundamentally as much a free for all within the nation on an economic level as the world system is a free for all and anarchic when it comes to the world police thing. I mean, you know, we talk about foreign policy and stuff, and one of the ideas out there of structural realism is this idea of anarchy at the world level, right? You know, somebody invades you, you're a tiny country. What are you going to do? You might just have to deal with it on your own. There's no world police to call. Likewise, oh, you're in America, you're in San Francisco, and you were born poor. What are you going to do? Who are you going to call? You might just have to deal with
Ghostbusters.
that. So in a way, you know, we have structural anarchy even in nations, even in governments, even in economic systems. There's still oftentimes structural anarchy. And so how do people survive in that? How do people find their way in that? And of course, the ultimate kind of manifestation, the ultimate Platonic um, archetype of this system would be South Korea, where they're now in the process of making you work 21 and a half hours a day. That's soon to be legal there. And so,
Really?
it,
I haven't heard that.
yeah, you should look that up. If you're ever wondering why their birth rate is the lowest in the world, you look up what it's like to live there. Are they a rich country? Technically, yes. um, you're screwed if you're not old money and you're born there. So, but the good news is you probably won't be born there because they don't have any kids. Nobody can afford or have time to have kids. So, you know.
Yeah, it's the same in Japan. Japan has similar issue where they had a
Japan has
birth rate.
similar issues, but South Korea is just so much worse than anything
Mhm.
Japan's got going on right now. I mean, everything you can imagine Japan's doing, South Korea's that on steroids. They're like the hyper neoliberal capitalism, basically. And so, so my later book is going to be centered around, that sort of thing, and how people might go about surviving when they might not have any future. And so it's an interesting sort of look at old money meets no money, that sort of thing. So
So
that's a romance I'm working on right now. So
I have a viewer here. I want to entertain him for a second.
yeah.
I think it's a little bit of a mean question, but he wanted me to ask you, do you think you're better than Hassan?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
This viewer asked me to ask you, do you think you're better than Hassan?
Better than Hassan? Well, in what regard? I mean, Hassan has more time to work out than me. One of the things I like to do once I'm able to do this full time is hit the gym every day, stream 16 hours a day, write a couple hours a day, work out the rest, and sleep a few hours. That's kind of it, and I'll do that in perpetuity, basically. So Hassan's better on the gym game, but I'll catch up once I can do it full time as well. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, I'm better than Hassan. My understanding of Hassan is that he's like an anarchist. It's like, okay, you want to get taken over by fascist armies? Great, let's do anarchy. I don't take
Yeah,
anarchists too
we can
seriously.
agree on that. We can agree on that. Um, he's a useful idiot for anarchy.
For anarchy? No, I think he's an actual anarchist. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's an Hassan viewer out there that can like show me a clip where he's explaining his views or whatever. My understanding of him is he doesn't believe in a state, and if you don't believe in a state, there is no way to protect the working people. There is no way to guard against fascism. The greatest, the greatest protector and the greatest keeper of our prosperity is the state. And that's why it's so important that we have a state that serves the people. And if we don't, it can be calamitous. And if we have no state, it can be even more calamitous because we can be invaded by a state that has none of our best interest at hand. That's what happened in Caledonia. They did their anarchy thing and they got taken over by Hitlerite forces. So,
Mhm.
because those Hitlerite
Um,
forces at least had a state. So it's so important that we have a state to resist that.
yeah, I guess, I'm wondering if I can ask you a somewhat personal question.
Sure, go for
Um,
it. This is an interview. You can ask anything as long
yeah,
as it's not
yeah,
TOS. You can ask anything. Let's
yeah, yeah,
go.
yeah, yeah. So like, you talk about like poverty and what it's like to grow up in poverty. Did you grow up in poverty, or did you grow up in like a middle class, or like what was your home
Yeah,
life
I grew up
like?
dirt poor. Grew up dirt poor, basically, absolutely. But it was never that big of an issue. A lot of people were just, a lot of people grow up in poverty, right? A lot of people I knew grew up in poverty. But then when I got a little bit older, I was more concerned with, you know, human rights abuses and stuff in other countries I saw as being even worse, that sort of thing. But understand, being poor in
Hmm.
Canada when I grew up, you could still put the lights on. You still had pretty secure living accommodations. Generally, life was it was serviceable. Now, if you're poor in Canada, you're screwed. Like there are folks out there who make 65, $70,000 a year, tradesmen, carpenters, and stuff. They live in their cars. They can't afford even a one bedroom because it's like 3,000 a month, 2,000 a month, depending on the area. Like it's a joke. Whereas back then, being poor in Canada meant you could even have a two bedroom. It might be in a bad part of town, and yeah, I grew up in kind of a bad part of town, but you'd have a two bedroom. Now, your doctor, you can't get a house. Good luck. They can't get a
I mean,
house
I
in my
don't know
city.
about that. I feel
But
like
you're a
doctors
doctor.
still get paid.
What?
basically, but I understand the point.
No, my point is that being poor, you still could pay the basics back in the day. Now,
Yeah,
being
right.
middle class, you're screwed unless you come from old money. So again,
Mhm.
doctors don't qualify for mortgages anymore. So you're screwed. You're never going to own anything.
Oh, I didn't.
So
I'm not sure if that. I see.
I'm
Yeah,
talking about
I didn't
Canada.
know. Okay.
No, what I'm saying
You're saying
is, what I'm
they don't
saying is,
qualify for
what I'm saying
mortgages.
is, like I grew up poor, but in the 90s and early 2000s, a poor family in Canada could still buy food and pay rent. Now, a middle class family can't really. It all has to go on credit cards. So the bar for just the bare minimum existence is so much higher in real terms in the last 5 years than it was in say 2010 or 2005. Out of control. Again, you make $150,000 a year. Nobody's going to give you a mortgage. So, whereas back
Mhm.
then, you could make minimum wage and get a house, right? It wouldn't be a good house, but it
Yeah,
was possible. So, so
yeah.
understand, my
It was
country's
much.
gone to
It was
shit.
easier to save.
So,
It was easier to save
so
for sure.
So no,
Um.
so yeah, I grew up in poverty, but the thing is, I want to be clear about something. Whether I grew up in poverty or I grew up in wealth or I grew up middle class or whatever, or you out there as the viewer, understand something. We should not base our economics on our own personal circumstance
No.
because let's say I was like some super billionaire right now. I like to use the example of South Korea because it's a better example than Canada. Let's say you're in South Korea. You're like some billionaire Samsung old money dude and you don't have to worry about work. You don't have to worry if you don't get 110% on your test after, your 16-hour studying days and stuff. You've got your bills paid for. Um, so you're like, I like the system as it is. Everything's fine. This is great. Okay, let's run that to its logical conclusion. You're fine. Everything's good for you today, tomorrow, a few years from now. Okay. But the consequence of your economics are nobody can afford to have kids and nobody's ever going to own anything and be happy. So the national cohesion goes down. There's no kids for the future armed services. That goes down. Eventually, your country's just not capable of repelling any sort of invasion at all with any degree of credibility. And now you're still uh, kicking it cushy in your penthouse in Gangnam, right? In the pool. But now the North Korean troops are at your door. Now
You're
the North
going
Korean
Gangnam
troops are at
style.
your door, and they're informing you that this is public property now, and you're going to get sent to Yodok for being a flash trader. So even then, even though the system was perfectly fine for you, the system was so bad at its core that it wasn't able to even protect itself down the road because there were no kids for the army anymore to protect you from getting your ass sent to Yodok or
Yeah.
to Kachong or wherever concentration camp they're going to send you. So for me, when I look at this, it shouldn't matter if you're a billionaire or the poorest kid on the street because our economics need to be fundamentally centered around national greatness and serving the people. And if they don't do that and it's only in serving your interest, well, it is possible to have economics that serve your personal interest and have the aggregate effect of serving the nation. But the problem is, so oftentimes, the people with power who live in the gated communities, they don't have the service of the people at heart. They only have their personal economic interest at heart. And so often that is in conflict with the interest of the nation. And where they diverge, as we see right now with Bill Gates buying up all this agricultural land and not using it for the right purposes, it comes to be at its end point an existential national security threat. It doesn't start out as an existential national security threat, but the logical conclusion of it is down the road, your country only has polluted rivers. Your country can't feed itself. Your country has no army. Your country can't defend itself. Nobody has any more kids because you were the only one that they were orienting their economics around. Okay. So, our economics, regardless of what you're born into, regardless of who you are, should all be the same. It should all be centered around economic self reliance, economic prosperity, and victory. So that's my economic approach. So,
Yeah. I guess like I'm curious because and How is that? I mean, I thought they tried to balance off the eventual end game of like an extreme position, with having like a mixed economy of some sort. Um, it doesn't really seem like they're interested in working in the framework of the Overton window that we just kind of discussed before. Um,
Yeah.
so how do you anticipate how do you want to position yourself in a way that you can maximize and this is what I'm trying to get at is how how do you think that the way that you're doing engaging in discourse now is the most effective way of doing so?
Well, I'm not
Um,
claiming that it's the most effective. Not everything I do is perfect. In fact, probably everything I do is imperfect because I'm not able to dedicate as much time to any one particular task as I might like. But I try to do
mhm.
the best with the resources I have. Now, with regards to the Overton window in Canada, especially, we're on a doom course. I'm not saying tomorrow it's over. What I'm saying is the Overton window of what we've restricted ourselves to, which is this open borders, cosmopolitan, global capital servicing, essentially, where we've basically become this place where the rich of the world can launder their money into real estate. That's not sustainable. Now, it might be sustainable for another 20 or 30 years, but at the current rate, if there isn't something done outside of the existing Overton window to rectify the situation, to give the country back to regular Canadians, it will be done so by force. And I'm not saying that that's going to happen. It's possible you'll have a figure that comes out there and does work towards solutions within some sort of existing framework that kind of address some of the problems for enough people such that we can keep chugging along as the world's real estate money laundering dump. But I'm skeptical that that's a course that we can maintain in perpetuity. What I think is most likely is that at some point, probably 25 to 40 years down the road, the same thing will happen here that happened in China or that happened in Egypt, which is that eventually, as complacent as we are, eventually you do reach a breaking point and the people rise up. And so, for me, there, as far as how I engage in discourse, I engage in discourse in two ways. I like to think of myself as sounding a warning alarm to those who might be in capable of affecting policy to say, "Hey, look, we're not on a sustainable trajectory here. If you want to maintain yourself as the ruling class, you might want to adjust what you're doing so that your system can survive with you as a ruling class for longer." Okay. The other part of it is actively championing, elevating the conditions of the people. And so, if the ruling class isn't able to figure out that way, if they're not able to thread that needle to provide a quality of life that's at least serviceable for a serviceable amount of people such that the country still stays complacent. If they're not able to do that, then we will eventually get ourselves a different political system. But that political system, understand, if that happens, the Overton window of what we're talking about right now will be irrelevant. The Overton window of what the party establishes then will be completely different. So,
Yeah, and that's like in my view, um I don't think it's that useful to think that far ahead because anything could happen tomorrow or next year or 10 years down the road that is not
potentially,
in the current that's not in the current trajectory. Look at COVID; it totally
yeah.
changed the way our world works. I mean, a
But
meteor can come down and hit uh and destroy half the world, and our entire fabric of our politics will change fundamentally, probably for a very long period of time.
Well, but I mean, you have to think long term, and the reason why you have to think long term is because if you just think short term, okay, it's Polyev versus Trudeau. They both serve the corporate elite. They both serve the landlords. They both serve open borders interests. So nothing actually changes. It's just a guy in a blue tie or a red tie. So if you think short term, nothing can actually change in the short term. The only time when like fundamental change can happen is in the long run. Again, I think we're one of the most complacent societies in human history. We're not China, we're not Egypt, we're not Syria. In Syria, people rose up and did a revolution because the price of bread went up 10%. You check out the Loblaws subreddits, the price of bread went up 10%, 15 times in the last 2 years, and people just took out more credit cards. We're a very complacent society. We're not Syrians. We don't rise up. We don't go out in the streets when people make our standard of living harder. But
Mhm.
eventually, you won't have access to that much debt anymore. Eventually, so many people won't have any way of providing food for themselves that potentially, I'm not saying it's going to happen. If you ask me, what are the chances there's a socialist revolution in Canada in 40 years? I think it's 20%. I think it's 20%. But
This is the thing that I kind of like maybe a little obsessed about. How did you come up with 20%?
how did I come up with 20%? Because
How
I
did you come
think,
up with 20%?
yeah, because I think there's about a 30% chance that the ruling class is able to figure out a serviceable enough solution with regards to housing, food, unemployment, and all these other issues affecting Canada right now, such that not a critical mass of people become homeless, not a critical mass of people are starving, not a critical mass of people are in a horrible situation. Everybody's still able to kind of get by and they're able to continue the system. I think there's about 30% chance of that. I think there's about a 50% chance that it's somewhere in between. In other words, things get really bad. There's a Great Depression, that sort of thing eventually emerges. But we're an extremely complacent society, and there's never really much of a charismatic leader to rally the people around, and we just chug along that way. And then I think there's about a 20% chance that we either go far right or we go far left. Now, I don't know which. I have no idea which. But I think the most
I
likely
don't
outcome.
like
No, I
this
think the most
conflict
like.
percentage.
But no, to
I
answer your
don't like
question.
this
No, no, no. To
conflict
answer your
percentage
question. To
having this
answer your
isn't.
question, I think the most likely outcome is the system continues the way it is, and the country just gets worse and worse each generation. And but understand, we can't just assume that that's what happens, because there are
Mhm.
other potential alternatives. There's the potential for incremental serviceability to maintain the system in a slightly better status quo. And then there's the potential for revolution. Those are all possibilities. I think the most likely one is the country just goes into a state of decline, though. So,
Mhm.
and I don't like that. I'm a
Uh,
nationalist. I want to make us great again. So, of course, if I recognize that the course that we're on is into decline and dilapidation, then why wouldn't I be out here and be loud and say we should be doing something different?
I'm
Why
not
should
saying you
I?
shouldn't
Why
be
should I?
loud.
Why should I operate? And my question is, why should I operate within an Overton window on a trajectory of dilapidation? Why? I guess that's my question.
I think that there are some courses of action you can take in the short term that don't. Well, I was trying to. Well, I consider the audience are VMs, but we were discussing the efficacy of being online and doing online advocacy versus like voting and running for your congressman and canvassing and voting in primaries and
Well, who has
voting
time
for
for that?
politicians.
Dude, I live in Canada. I have to work 7 days a week and barely survive. I can only be
Yeah.
online. I'm not rich, dude. If I was rich, yeah, may I be out there going door to door, doing like the Dylan Burns thing or whatever. He's got more time on his hands. Bro, I live in Canada. Things are bad here. Nobody's got time for that. That's like a rich kid sort of thing, right? So that's like what they
That's like
do
a
to like get their leadership credits so that they can get into Harvard on their legacy boosted application. Bro, if you go to the people, nobody got time for that, bro. Nobody got time for that. So,
I understand. I just don't like I don't like this concrete 20% thing.
oh, you might not
That
like
doesn't
it. You might not like it. I
that
imagine.
seems
No,
so
no, no, no. I
unmathematical.
imagine. Like if it
It's
does
not gonna pull me
happen,
out of the ass, bro.
like if it does happen, I imagine you probably wouldn't be too happy. But I don't imagine a lot of people in America would be too happy if Canada abandoned them. If they lost Canada the way they same way they lost China, right? If we went our own way, so.
Yeah.
No, I think
Well,
a
I
lot
mean,
of
I'm not.
Americans. I think a lot of Americans were upset and felt betrayed when the Chinese people were sick of paying 70% of their income to rent, And I think they'll also feel betrayed when that might happen to the Canadian people down the road. So, but my point here is fundamentally this is a matter for us to determine for ourselves. It's not a matter for Americans to determine for us.
Mhm. Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. The percentage, I still have a I'm not gonna press it anymore. I think we've
Yeah, yeah, we can move on. So.
but yeah. So I think uh there's some comments asking if I'm Israeli or if we support Israel. Just to let you guys know, this isn't
Oh,
Israel.
the
We
genocide questions. Uh-oh.
we're not addressing the Israel anything Israel related. Um if people are really
Wait,
interested in
wait. Are
that,
you
we
gonna
can look at
ask me
that some
about
other
that?
time.
No, you want to do it, don't you? Because I'm
No,
not
I
too much a
know.
fan. I'm
No,
not
I
too much a fan
know.
of Netanyahu. So.
No, dude, I don't want to do this with it tonight. Like, we have to probably close this out,
Yeah, we
kind
can
of
close this
soon.
out pretty shortly. I'll just say this very quickly. If Biden wants to leave a good legacy for himself as a strong leader, he should put sanctions on Israel until they stop the genocide. There, I said it. So.
Okay. Well, um, heard from him, folks. I'm not gonna challenge or this isn't supposed to be a conversational stream, so I'm just gonna be silent for now. But one person asked, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being super dumb, how dumb was Ted Cruz's idea of a flat tax?
Oh, flat tax? Flat tax is like a
Yeah,
9. Flat tax is like a 9.
the nine.
Yeah, it's a pretty dumb thing to do. So.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, now
Um,
Ted Cruz is not that smart. Doesn't that guy give a ton of his money to like a scam religion or something? Like, I mean, they're all scams, but I'm pretty sure he's like into Scientology or something, right?
I don't think this is Simon policy. That might be thinking of someone else.
Oh, Tom Cruise. Tom
Yeah,
Cruise.
Tom
Oh,
Cruise.
you said I thought you said Tom Cruise. No, you
No, I
meant
said
Ted Cruz.
Ted
Okay, but
Cruz.
Ted Cruz and Tom Cruise are both equally dumb. So like they have similar names, but they also have similar intelligences, which to say they have a lack of intelligence. So.
Well, I mean, Tom Cruise knows how to act well. I'll give him that.
Okay, Tom
But
Cruise at least is talented. What does Ted have going for him? He can phone bank for Trump miserably. Trump can insult his wife and then he goes out there and phone banks for Trump. No, I don't respect Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is a sad man. I'll say that about Ted Cruz.
Lion, some call him Lion's Head.
Yeah, Lion Ted. And then he went on and said
Lion's
his
Head.
yeah, and then he went on and he pointed out that his wife was ugly in public. And then Ted Cruz went, yes, sir, and voted for him and phone banked for him. And it was like, yeah, I'm with the Trump campaign. It's Ted Cruz here. I'd like you to go out today. I'd like you to vote for Trump. And he looks all kind of sad, and there's the Trump signs in the background. It's like, dude, who are you kidding? I mean, at least Jeb dropped out and kept some degree of
Yeah,
dignity.
Zeb saved some of his dignity.
He saved some of
Um,
his dignity. I didn't see Jeb out there phone banking for Trump. Ted Cruz is a man. One, he's a man with no principle. Two, he's a man with no honor. So I don't respect the guy. Look, as much as Tom Cruise giving a ton of his money to like a scam, that's a lot more dignified than Ted Cruz giving his money to Trump. So
yeah.
embarrassing, embarrassing. And by the way, I don't mind Trump. Trump's kind of a funny guy. But I mean, if I was Ted Cruz, I could say this: I wouldn't have done what Ted Cruz did. Ted Cruz seriously needs to like ask himself, like, dude, what are you even doing? Like, what are you even doing? Seriously. So
Yeah.
just
Um,
embarrassing. And of course, his flat tax is another expression of that. He's subservient to Trump, and then he's subservient to the billionaire class. Of course, they want a flat tax. Of course. Well, why should somebody who makes $1 billion a year pay the same taxes as you if you're a janitor? How's that fair? Well, Ted Cruz will advocate for it if you give him enough money. Pathetic, embarrassing, sad. So, yeah, and he's also lying, Ted. He is lying. He is a liar. He's a
Lion's
proven
Head.
liar. So
Lion's Head. Yep.
Lion's Head. That's why the nickname was effective. That's why it stuck because
Yeah.
it was true. It was true. You can watch the
Yeah.
clips of him getting called out. So, like he's
Yeah.
just a he's a scammy career politician. So
Mhm. So I think we're gonna probably wrap it up
okay,
about now. The zoo, I think I understand a lot more about where you're coming from and the zoo transformation that I've gone through. Um, I just want to leave one more room for one more thing. Was there any questions you wanted to ask me?
yeah, sure. I guess what I would ask you is, um, has the deterioration in the quality of life and the deterioration in the ability for the average person to have at least as good a life as their parents in the last 5 years, has that affected or changed any of your political and economic positions? Because I've adjusted accordingly to that. But a lot of liberal folks that I've talked to who are still liberal after all these years, they haven't changed at all. Have you adjusted any of your politics or economics in response to the crises we're facing?
I think I'm more understanding of where people are coming from. Um, but it's hard for me personally um, to map my personal beliefs onto that just because I consider myself more of an optimist. And I, not that I feel like everything in the current system is right and the status quo, all that is right. But like I do agree that, companies still create things of value. I still think that people are excited for things. I still feel like um, the world as we have it, a lot of it is negative, but there's a lot of positivity you can pull from the world. And I, I talk to people of all sorts of political and not necessarily political, just like socioeconomic backgrounds, and they um I mean they seem to really love life. Now that's not really like a accurate mapping onto like how uh how well people are doing with um the insane rise in inflation and the effects of the overlying effects of COVID and all this. But I'm sort of still an optimist. I don't want to make any declarative statements on on this. I still believe that capitalism has a lot of value and it's a very generally very positive thing. Um, but obviously that's like on a case by case basis. Um, but um, I'm sure my views of the world and your views of the world are. I mean, we have fundamentally different life experiences, and uh, and I've the way that I've seen the world is just through my the way that I've gone through work and the way that I value work. Um, maybe different from you. Um, so yeah. I don't really call myself a populist. I would say I'm still liberal at this point. Um, but I mean, I try to empathize with people who are struggling and do have um issues getting by. Um, now, yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah,
so
no,
that's
fair
kind of where I'm
enough.
like,
Fair enough. I would
yeah.
just say we need more than empathy. We need ideological mechanisms to account for the failures of the current system that we just don't have right now, and we can learn things from other countries that have uh, navigated their way around these sorts of issues or outright prevented them in the first place. But I think yeah, we're at about the 2 hour mark, so it's been good to talk with you, John. Thing is, look, doesn't matter. We don't have to agree. I talk to people. I disagree with them basically everything. I'll be friends with a lot of different people. And we've
Yeah,
had some good
yeah. I mean,
times back in the day, right? And I think you're somebody who like enjoys debates and stuff. I'm always down to have debates. I like debates, so
Yeah.
and it's kind of
We'll
hard to
have to,
debate. It's kind of hard
what I
to
kind of,
debate. It's kind of hard to debate with people you agree with on everything, right? So,
yeah, no, it is. I, uh, I, what I kind of want to do with this show is that, like, sometimes I might want to host debates and just be like a moderator. Um,
based.
uh, not necessarily even like on political stuff, just like on, um, it can just be like on controversial media shit, just basically anything. Um, so, we'd love to have you back on. I appreciate you
Oh
helping
yeah.
me start this uh stream out strong. It's been a very good test, and thank you everyone in the comments for watching. I'm not sure how often I'll be doing these, but I'm gonna aim for at least twice a month. Just to kind of like rhythm on things. And yeah. Thanks so much, audience. We will see you next time.
Have a good night, folks.
And we're off.
Hi,
Um,
base.
yeah, how did you like that? How did I
No, it's
do?
good. It's good. So, I'm gonna be doing like a gaming stream soon. So, yeah, no, that was good. So, thanks for the interview. And so, do you play Fortnite?
Uh, I don't, but a lot of my friends do actually.
You should get Fortnite because like that's mostly what I stream these days for like gaming content.
Dude, I'm a bit busy mostly because uh I I don't know if you've been following, but I've been playing this game called Dance Rush Stardom. Uh and it's like this dancing game that's kind of like VDR. Uh, and I'm going to a tournament in Texas in a couple of weeks actually. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, so I have like all my props and stuff, and actually no, in less than 2 weeks. So next Saturday, it's going to be streamed on Twitch, and I'm going to be on stream for like 4